Good afternoon and welcome to the September 26th, 2023 Oklahoma City Economic Development Trust meeting. I'll now call the meeting to order. Item 2 on the agenda are the minutes from the August 29th, 2023 Trust meeting. If there's no questions or comments on those minutes, we can take a motion. We have a motion and a second. Please vote. The item passes. Item 3 on the agenda is the ratification of claims. You can take that with a motion. I have a motion and a second. And that item passes as well. Brings us to item 4, items for individual consideration. Item 4A is the Oklahoma City Economic Development Foundation Film and Creative Industries presentation with Ms. Simpson.
Thank you. I'm going to start by apologizing for the length of my report. I got a little carried away giving you all the details. It's like 20 pages long. So I'll give you a little key to how it's laid out so you can get through it a little more quickly. The first cover letter is basically an update of some of the things that have happened most recently. But when the agreement was drawn up, the professional services agreement before the office was opened, there were 10 benchmarks for the coming year, which would have been FY23, and those are laid out on the first page of the letter, 1 through 10. And as you get into the report, the chart is broken up by those items. So each expectation is numbered, and it lists what the expectation is and what the activities were that went into achieving those. And I'm happy to report that we were able to achieve all 10 of them. So it's been a really hectic year, but a very good one. We talk a lot about the incentive program when I'm here, but I want to just remind you there's a lot of other work that goes on within the office. And some of those benchmarks were recruitment efforts, which were in collaboration with some of the local companies in bringing in the big feature that filmed here and hopefully will be coming back soon because the strike is being resolved as we speak. A lot of my work is in the area of serving as an ombudsperson, if you will. We've got a lot of different elements in the state, different cities, there are certain tribes that have incentives, and a lot of what I'm trying to do is bring these elements toward the middle so that we're working closer together and in collaboration, because that, in my view, that's the way we succeed. Every small piece is important, but together we make a really greater whole. I work a lot on workforce development, and I serve on the board of Film Education Institute of Oklahoma, and they work closely with Career Tech, the Career Tech campuses, OCCC, and the other colleges and universities. And a lot of what we're trying to do is the same thing. You've got all these separate pieces, but how can we coalesce those pieces, bring them towards the middle where we have a cohesive plan? And that's really in our purview for the coming year to get that more codified and off the ground. And there are a lot of really great pieces. I know a meeting took place recently with the Lieutenant Governor to talk about all of the workforce ideas, and the Cherokee Nation has hired a consultancy firm. They're getting a piece of it going. So I'm hopeful a year from now this will look a lot more developed than it does today. I spend a great deal of my time on community outreach, and that is industry partners, community leaders, and anyone that can be a part of the conversation to help grow the production environment here, help grow the incentives, and that includes an eye toward diversity. As you've seen with our rebate applicants, that's a big part of what the focus is lifting up people from underserved communities and illustrating there are many entry points into our industry. You don't have to have a college degree. You could have a career tech degree. You could be retrained and formerly incarcerated, and there are places for you in this industry. We sponsor local film festivals. We had a big presence at Dead Center this year. I'm already in talks with them to increase that next year to include more panels, which I found to be really useful in spotlighting diverse segments of our filmmaking population. And they haven't announced it, but there is an element to the film festival next year that will be new that I don't want to spill their news, but it'll be more of a central hub where there will be more of a location for the festival for people to gather. Let's see, we will have a very large presence at American Film Market in late October, early November, and that will be the State Film Office, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, and the Cherokee Nation. It's the first time we've done anything like this as a group. We've got a space at the film market, which is an international sales market, much like Cannes, and we're hosting an industry reception for studio execs and TV execs on November 2nd in Hollywood, and we're hoping that will help us get traction of recruiting not only films but TV series. And on the last part of my report, you're going to see year 2 goals. And this year has been a lot about creating databases, getting the website launched, getting the rebate program up and running. Year 2, I really want to look at some big picture items such as long-term funding for this office beyond the 3-year commitment and how we make that happen. Working towards a unified legislative agenda to get our rebate cap increased on the state level to bring in more projects to Oklahoma City. Workforce development initiatives, as I've already described. And 2 things that are really important. Our rebate program starts at $500,000, and the state's minimum budget is $50,000. That leaves a lot of people in the beginning of their career unable to access either. So I would love to work with others and create an investors fund, if you will, an investors circle, whereby high net worth individuals who might need to invest in something for tax purposes could look at the film industry as a possibility, and it helps grow our industry in doing so. We also want to create workforce training scholarships. And I'll just end on a high note. For the first year, our direct spend in this film industry was $102 million, and that is direct dollars based on the people who would share their impact numbers with me. So there's no inflated numbers there, and there's no multipliers, and I think that's a really compelling story. And of that $102 million, $43 million were incentive projects, the 2 of our incentive projects. So we're off and running. It's been a great year. I'm really proud of the work that we've done, and welcome your questions or input.
Any questions? Comments? No?
Great job.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Simpson. All right, we can take a motion to receive. We have a motion and a second. Please vote. Item passes. Item 4B is the Economic Development Agreement with Canoe Manufacturing LLC for its establishment of a new manufacturing facility in Oklahoma City. Mr. Sudol.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is the EDA with Canoe. There have been a couple changes that we want to make sure and point out. So still have 550 new to market jobs over the 3-year period, average wage of $71,558. One thing we did want to point out, that their previous estimate of capital investment has dropped from the $347 million to $211 million. I believe there's some things that ended up being decided that were being housed outside of Oklahoma City. This does not change, from staff's perspective, the recommended incentive. Most of those incentives, as you may recall, we take all those numbers and the chamber helps us drop those into a model. They're primarily driven by the jobs and the wage numbers, not necessarily capital investment. I'll also say that, the incentive remains at the not to exceed 1 million, and I believe in your packet the 10-year tax impact is over $4.5 million. I think it was the 5 years about $2.5 million, somewhere in that range. So we think the economic impact would greatly exceed this incentive that's provided. The other piece that we wanted to point out was There was also an allowance in there to, for a temporary period during ramp-up to count some contractors. Now, they would have to meet the same wage, benefits, all of those things, work there at the site. It allows for up to 50% in year one, dropping to 30% year two, and then 10% year three. So it allowed for some temporary, and it also allows for some remote work, but within the city limits. But those things are a little bit different, a little bit outside of the normal on those pieces, but otherwise, all of the rest of the terms are kind of the standard terms and conditions. I guess with that, would be happy to answer any other questions.
Any questions, comments? All right, if not, we can take a motion on the item. We have a motion and a second. And the item passes. Brings us to item 4C on the agenda. Third Amendment to the First National Center Redevelopment Project Economic Development Agreement for the garage component. Mr. Sudol.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this one, if you'll recall, I believe is originally a $14 million loan that was, or not to exceed $14 million loan. This was part of the First National project, specifically the garage component. We have a deal in place to basically provide a backstop on the leverage loan, and they had an option where they could have us take out, and basically, I guess at that point, we become the lender. They had delivered to us in March a notice that they would like to exercise that option. I think there were further discussions with the city, and I think this is a really good option that provides an extension of that opt-out notice and a deadline until July of '24. If not, we would have to come up with, I think the outstanding amount's $12.1 million. So this would allow the bank to continue on as the lender there and us not have to put up our cash, which I think is a good thing from our perspective. I will point out, though, the loan, Joanna pointed out the loan does mature in December of '24, so it would have to be, even if we had to take that on, it would presumably have to be, paid off by the developer, or they'd have to find other permanent financing at that point in time, so we wouldn't have a long window of exposure. So that's the main change. Did I miss anything on?
So also, since the CrossFirst Bank provided us notice in March, we were supposed to give them or take out the loan, pay off CrossFirst by October 1st. We were under the impression in talks with the garage owner that they had everything worked out and had new terms renegotiated with CrossFirst. When we all got on the phone with CrossFirst, we realized that wasn't the case. So we've also extended, it's an extremely confusing document, I apologize, but we've also extended that October 1st deadline to the end of this December so that they can get their refinancing with CrossFirst done. And hopefully that all works out. And then they get that second option to opt out if they want to next July. So that was, it was very confusing. It was a last minute thing that we had to throw in there a couple of weeks ago because we thought that they had it all worked out. In fact, they had not, so.
And we're trying to avoid us having to.
Yes, we're doing everything
cash, so.
we can, yes.
Any comments, questions? If not, we can take a motion on the item. We have a motion and a second. Item 4C passes as well. Brings us to item 4D on the agenda, to receive the fiscal year 2023 annual tax increment finance district reports. Mr. Sudol.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is a requirement from state statute that we have to do an annual report for all of our TIF districts. This is something that will be sent out to the other taxing jurisdictions. Just to summarize, it's got, it's quite a lengthy document, but if you go through it, it's got a list for each TIF district of what the base value was that was set when it was created, what the incremental value is that's been generated, what the total value is now in that TIF district, and then we also have, just sort of for informational, the incremental change in value from the prior year. In addition, I think there's a couple of TIF districts that also have breakouts between direct and indirect. So there's a couple where we have things where if we incentivize, we kept all of the increment, and then if things happened organically, we only kept half of the increment. So there are a couple TIF districts, if you see some of that, and we have sort of the breakout in growth between those two items. I will point out TIF number 1 was our first TIF that has actually expired its 25-year term. So it's in there this year, and it shows some incremental value of 0, but it will probably drop off the report next year. We went ahead and included it just in case this year. So with that, be happy to answer any specific questions, but that's generally, oh, one other thing it provides also, I forgot, is the budget and budget categories, and it includes all the projects that have been approved allocations. So you can see what's been allocated, what's been spent, sort of by budget category.
So this has all TIFs and all projects, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Any comments? Any other questions? All right, we could take a motion on item 4D. We have a motion and a second. That item passes as well. Brings us to item 5, General Manager's Report. Ms. McSpadden?
So I think she's saying we have, it's in the packets, the normal stuff. There's nothing unusual to point out.
That's weird.
Your mind reading now?
Item 6 on the agenda are comments from staff. Any comments from trustees? Any citizens sign up to be heard? All right, that brings us to item 7 on the agenda. We are adjourned.